Alright, so these three problems are all factoring, but in this case, our first number is 1. So in this case, it's 1x squared plus 14x plus 40. Now there's a pattern with all three of these. If you notice the pattern, it makes it easier. I'll explain the pattern at the end. But if you don't notice the pattern, that's fine. It doesn't make it any easier or any harder. You just get a little bit more work to do, okay? So we're going to do the same process as before, a times c and b. Now a times c is 40, b is 14, okay? On the right side, or the left side, we're going to list our factors of 40, and that's two numbers that multiply to be 40. For me, the first one that comes to mind is 8 times 5, that's 40. And on the right side, we are going to add those two. On the right side, we are going to add those two. That's 8 plus 5, and that equals 13. Okay? We want 14, we got 13. That didn't work. I usually try to get you guys to put one incorrect one. Show some work so you know what you're doing here. Okay? Now we'll go ahead and list the correct one. In this case, it is 4 times 10, and 4 plus 10 is indeed 14, and that's what we want. So we will now take this middle number right here, this 14x, okay, and that's not what I wanted to do. Let's try that again. Oh, we're going to take that. There we go. We're going to take that middle number, okay, that 14x. We're going to split it, and instead of 14, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to use those two numbers, okay? It looks like this. X squared plus 4x plus 10x plus 40. If you normally had this right here, you would add those two and get back to there. But we're factoring. We're undoing this process. The next step that we do here is we group the first two terms. We group the second two terms. All right. You always group the first two and the second two. Boom. Group them together. Okay. After this, we're going to say, hey, what do these two terms have in common? Hopefully you notice they both have an x. Alright, so we're going to factor that out. That means we're going to take an x out, we're going to write it down, and then we're going to take an x from both of these terms right here. That gives us, or that leaves us with x plus 4. We're going to do the same thing for the second parentheses. We're going to say, hey, what do 10x and 40 have in common? They both can be divided by 10, so we're going to factor out a 10. So take a 10 on the outside, and that leaves us with x plus 4. Now we notice, or hopefully you notice, that we both have x plus 4 in our parentheses, so we could factor that out. That leaves us, so we factor it out, it becomes x plus 4 on the outside of what was left, x plus 10. And this is the factored answer of x plus 4 times x plus 10. It's the factored form of x squared plus 14x plus 40. That problem is finished. Okay? If you'll notice, the parentheses are going to be x plus a number, x plus a number. Okay? The number in this case is whatever our factors ended up being, 4 and 10. There's 4, there's 10. 4, 10. This problem is exactly the same way. Same process, different numbers. We'll start off by making our t-chart. A times c, b. A times c in this case is 30, b is a negative 11. Okay? Now we have a positive number on the left and a negative number on the right. That means we're going to need two negative numbers. We need two negative numbers to multiply to a positive 30, but to add to a negative number. A negative 3 times a negative 10, add those on the other side, doesn't work. Okay, well, how about a negative 6 times a negative 5? Okay, yeah, negative 6 times a negative 5, negative 6 plus a negative 5, that equals negative 11. That's what we want. That works. All right, now, I already know the answer. Because of the pattern that I talked about in that previous problem, these two numbers right here, the negative 6 and the minus 5, are going to be my two numbers inside of my parentheses. I'm going to go ahead and write my answer down at the bottom, and then I'll work it out. It's going to be x minus 6 and x minus 5. That's what my answer is going to be. Okay, now let's do the actual problem. Let's work it out, okay? What I'm going to do is just the same process as before. Instead of a negative 11, I'm going to use those two guys right there. That means it becomes x squared minus 6x minus 5x plus 30. Again, group the first two, group the second two. I like to keep this negative right here with the 5. And that means we're adding a negative in this case. It's a little weird, but you can kind of stick with me here. Okay? We'd say, hey, what does these two terms have in common? Well, they both have an x in common. So I'm going to take that x out. In doing so, that leaves me with x minus 6. Okay? We look at the second parentheses and we say, hey, what do these two terms have in common? Well, they can both be divided by a negative 5. So I will factor out a negative 5. That leaves me with x minus 6. We say, hey, what parentheses did I write twice? Well, we wrote x minus 6 twice. We'll factor that out. That leaves us with x minus 5. And if you'll notice, this answer right here matches the answer I wrote down in the very beginning. Okay, that's the shortcut. Let's look at one more problem. Again, a times c, t-chart. B, a times c is a negative 21. B is a negative 4. I have two negatives in this case, so that means most likely we're going to have a negative and a positive. Not actually most likely, we are going to. Alright, so we need a negative and a positive. Well, we can do how about a positive 7 times negative 3? And a positive 7 plus a negative 3, that equals a positive 4. It's not what I want. I want a negative 4. In that case, it's a real simple fix. All you have to do is switch the signs on those two. So I'm going to use a negative 7 times positive 3, and a negative 7 plus a positive 3. Well, that works. Okay. Again, that means that I know my final answer is going to be x minus 7 times x plus 3. There's my final answer. I already know that. I'm going to work through the process, though. Split this middle term here, and I'm going to use those two guys. Okay, becomes x squared minus 7x plus 3x minus 21. Notice, okay, sometimes we make this mistake. Notice I'm just replacing this middle minus 4x. I still have that minus 21 at the end. I still have that x squared at the beginning. These two guys in the middle came from over here. Alright, group the first two, group the second two. We ask ourselves, what do these two terms have in common? Well, they both have an x. There's an x squared there, there's an x there, they both have an x in common. I'm going to factor that out. That becomes x minus 7. Inside the parentheses is what's left. We ask ourselves the same question with the second parentheses. What do a 3x and a 21 both have in common? Well, they do not have an x. This guy over here doesn't have an x, but they can both be divided by 3. So what we will do is we will factor out that 3. Take that 3 out, and then divide both of those terms by 3, and you get x minus 7 again. Hopefully you notice, hey, both parentheses we got there are x minus 7. We factor that x minus 7 out, and we write what's left, which is x plus 3. And we are finished. Same answer that we got all the way down here from the beginning. Okay, there you go. That's it.